Lost in History, 1984, Reconstructed, Chapter 1, Audiobook. The Genesis of Genocide. A just society cannot be built on tolerance for the most egregious acts of violence that occurred in the past, and a society cannot heal and achieve new levels of unity and solidarity by turning away from the plight of those who suffered and are still suffering. Kofi Annan, United Nations Secretary General. Genocide, a term so politically charged that we hesitate to use it, even when the nature of the atrocities against the citizen of a country by their own government can be classified in no other way. This was the situation in Punjab, where the cruel and inhumane torture and killing over 1 lakh religious practitioners by the police and government can only be referred to as genocide, as defined by Article 2 of the United Nations Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. To this day, the horrific event of 1984 took place in India remain unknown to most of the world. In order to understand why a government would design the suffocation of an entire religious group, we must take a close look at the foundation of the Sikh tradition and political situation of India at the time. Initiated in the 15th century, the Sikh revolution of Guru Nanak, the founder prophet of the Sikh faith, forever altered the landscape of India. His revelations, along with those of the other 9 Sikh Gurus, emphasized the oneness of the divine and the inherent value of all humans as manifestations of the Creator. The message of universal equality presented and practiced by the Sikh Gurus clashed irreconcilably with the fundamental inequality of the unjust social stratification that ruled India and threatened the system on which the division of caste was founded and enforced. In addition to an ideal of equality, the Sikh doctrine also emphasized the protection of those who cannot defend themselves. Therefore, to a devout Sikh, spirituality and defending the defenseless are equally important aspects of the faith. Sikhs are required to protect any victim of tyranny and injustice, regardless of their caste, religion, race, or any other category of social division. For example, when Emperor Ahmad Shah Abdali raided India for booty and kidnapped women of various faiths, Sikhs rose to the challenge, recapturing the kidnapped women and returning them home safely. In this way, Sikhs challenged injustice simply because it is unjust, without regard to the social or religious identity of the oppressed. Of course, challenging the power of rulers creates problem for the powerful as well as the challengers. An example more relevant to the scope of the book can be taken from 1975. In this year, Indian Prime Minister Indira Gandhi was convicted of election fraud by the Allahabad High Court and ordered to be unseated from her position in government. Instead of conceding powers, Gandhi coerced the Indian President Fakhruddin Ali Ahmad to declare a national emergency. This meant that the Prime Minister had the power to rule by decree. State and parliament elections would be postponed and the civil liberties guaranteed by the Indian Constitution would be suspended. In this way, Indira Gandhi retained power and imposed an illegitimate and repressive rule over India from 1975 until 1977. True to their principles and traditions, the Sikhs strongly opposed this illiberal regime. Over 50,000 Sikhs courted arrest during this period as they peacefully marched and protested outside of the Darbar Sahib Due to these public objections to the abuse of power as well as the nationwide dissatisfaction with the dictatorial government, Indira Gandhi lost the 1977 Indian elections by a landslide. However, ineffective political action, economic decline, and fractioning within the succeeding Janata Party led to Mrs. Gandhi's re election a mere 3 years later. Her political strategy remained obstinate over the intervening years, and when she returned to power, Indira Gandhi instituted a tighter control over the Indian state by vesting additional power in the offices of the Parliament and Prime Minister, both of which would assuredly be under her control. In response, the Sikhs launched an agitation demanding decentralization of political power and restoration of civil liberties. The nationwide popularity of the movement did not escape the notice of Mrs. Gandhi and her Congress party. In reaction to the campaign that was flourishing throughout Punjab, her team devised a strategy of divide and conquer. Religious tensions were manufactured, driving Hindus and Sikhs against one another. As long as the agitators were divided, the threat of a decentralization movement would be minimized. 1984 was an important election year, and the lack of support from Punjab troubled Mrs. Gandhi. She realized the unlikelihood of receiving votes from the Sixth constituency and began counting on Punjabi Hindu voters to carry the state. For this reason, her campaign bolstered its divide and conquer strategy and focused on communal instabilities and insecurities as the underlying theme of her platform. Her campaign depicted Sikhs as an anti-national, violent and separatist community. Punjabi Hindus rallied around her platform, believing that she would best represent their interests. Mrs. Gandhi's political strategy began with the vilification of the Sikhs, political institutions and leaders in national media. Example, newspapers, magazine, television. After using media propaganda to construct the Sikhs as a dangerous and uncontrollable enemies in the eyes of the public, the Indian government projected itself as the savior by launching a full-scale assault on the Darbar Sahib during the first week of June 1984. Although over 1 lakh innocent Sikhs were slaughtered in this assault, the government gained public favor by challenging the community that had become synonymous with anti-nationalism and antagonism. Influenced by the media campaigns, few Indians opposed the barbaric human rights violation and mass murder. Government attempts to silence the decentralization movement neither began nor ended with the Operation Blue Star. It extended beyond 1984 in a manner that quickly spun out of control, seeking to crush the spirit of the Sikh community. For this reason, following the attack on the Darbar Sahib, several hundred of thousands of Sikhs have been killed or tortured to death under various pretexts. For example, a photograph provided by the villagers of Shutrana illustrates the brutal torture of Avtar Singh at the hands of the police. Avtar Singh's limbs are visibly disjointed. Horrific iron-shaped burn marks covers his body and large areas of bone are exposed. The picture also evidences that sole of his feet have been pierced by hot rods and pliers have been used to wrench out his flesh. This gruesome example is cited not because it is harshly unique, but rather exemplify routine methods of torturing and eliminating Sikhs in India. Just as the Jews were killed in the Holocaust simply for being Jewish, Sikhs have been butchered in India simply for being Sikh. Sikhs opposed the illiberal government rule, and as a result, anyone who looked and behaved as a member of the faith was branded and treated as terrorists without trial or justice. Moreover, independent human rights organizations such as Amnesty International have been branded as terrorist sympathizers by the Indian government for their efforts to assist the victims and their families. To this day, such organizations have been restricted from parts of Punjab so as to avoid an investigation into the odious crimes against humanity. Several books that address the Sikh genocide have been banned by the Indian government and labeled as seditious. The few copies of these books available in India were confiscated and burned shortly after their publication. For the most part, the government officials and politicians involved in the attack have escaped criticism, scrutiny, and litigation. Those that hold inside information about Operation Blue Star have been reluctant to tell their stories, for they have been silenced by the fear of government reprisal. Witness fear of their lives and for the lives of their families. To expose the truth about the genocide is to gamble with death. Thus, the poignant reality of the human rights violation in India remains primarily in the hearts of those who have miraculously survived the machinations of their own government. Unless we take action urgently, their extraordinary stories will be sealed by their deaths. The Citizens for Democracy served as one of the most prestigious human rights organizations in India. Comprised of a retired Supreme Court justice and 5 eminent Indian intellectuals, this fact-finding team is still considered to be one of the most impartial investigators of the atrocities that took place in 1984 and thereafter in a work banned by Indian government entitled Report to the Nation: Oppression in Punjab. The group shed light on the situation in India. Today, it is the state itself which openly indulges not only in murder and assault but also in inhumane torture, molestation of women, non-production of the accused before a magistrate, destruction of crops, frequent raids and harassment of the friends and relatives of the accused, and false encounters leading to gruesome deaths. The above speaks to the situation in the world's largest democracy, a country that the United Nations itself has lauded for its dedication to the protection of minority rights. Faced with such clear, undeniable evidence of the grave human rights violations that have occurred in India, it proves difficult to turn a blind eye to the plight of hundreds of thousands of innocents who continue to suffer from the aftershock of governmental oppression. I. J. Singh of New York University comments on the situation of Sikhs in India in his essay 1984 Revisited. If I can discuss apartheid in South Africa, why not the genocidal policies of an Indian government against its own people? There is no guarantee that evidence will last, nor that it will not be tarnished in time. If some objectivity can come with time, so can hardened prejudice. There is no reason for neglect. Years from now, historians will reconstruct history from what we have said today. Respectable authors like Patwant Singh and Khushwant Singh, who have no truck with Sikh separatists, have labelled the killings of Sikhs in India government inspired and organized. Akin to the Nazi programs against the Jews, tell the Jews worldwide that what happened to them in Nazi Germany is of no concern outside the borders of Germany. Tell the world that what happens in the Middle East today is irrelevant to the Jew or Arab living in America. In the valley of fear, brutality, and inhumanity, one element stands tall and proud. This is the untold story of the valor and spirit of a brave people who have the courage to sacrifice so that others can live in freedom.